I never imagined the day would come when my own parents would look me in the eye, figuratively, over the phone, and tell me that my children weren't welcome in their home. Yet there I was, standing in my kitchen, frozen in disbelief as my mother's voice played through the speaker. Thanksgiving was only a few weeks away, and when she'd first said, "Honey, we need to talk about Thanksgiving this year," I'd felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. Despite the strain that had built up between us over the years, I still clung to those traditions, to the hope that maybe this year would be different. My kids, Emma and Lucas, adored their grandparents, no matter the growing distance between us. "Of course, Mom," I said, smiling faintly. "What's the plan?" In my mind, I could already picture it, the golden turkey resting on its platter, the cinnamon scent of pumpkin pie drifting through their house, laughter echoing off the walls as the family gathered around the table. But then came a pause. A long, heavy pause that tightened something deep inside my chest. "Well," Mom began, clearing her throat, "this year we're doing things a little differently. It's going to be a smaller dinner, just adults, you know, something more intimate." My smile faltered. "Oh," I said slowly. "So, no kids at all?" Another pause. Then, with careful hesitation, she replied, "Well, not exactly." A cold knot twisted in my stomach. "What do you mean?" Mom sighed, the kind of sigh that made it sound like she was the one being forced into discomfort. "Ally, we love your kids, we really do. But they're a bit energetic. Honestly, we just feel like it would be better if you left them with a sitter this year." I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady the rush of heat rising in me. "So, just my kids?" I asked, my voice trembling between disbelief and anger. "What about Daniel's?" "Daniel, my older brother. The golden child. The one who could do no wrong, no matter how many times he actually did." There was another silence, and that was all the confirmation I needed. Finally, Mom admitted softly, "Daniel and Sophie are coming with their boys. But you know how well-behaved they are, Ally. They're just quieter, more refined. It's easier to have them at the table." Her words hit like a slap. My throat tightened, and a wave of heat flushed through me. The message was clear, not all grandchildren were welcome. And for the first time, I began to wonder if I'd been clinging to a version of family that no longer existed. I felt like I had been slapped, like the floor had been pulled out from beneath me. "They're just children," I said, my voice trembling, the words catching in my throat. "Emma is 7, and Lucas is 4. Of course they have energy, but they're sweet, and they love you." Mom's tone sharpened, the warmth evaporating from her voice. "We're just trying to have a peaceful evening, Ally. It's not personal." "Not personal." I clenched my jaw, swallowing the surge of anger that burned in my chest. It wasn't just about Thanksgiving. It was about every time they had treated my children like an afterthought, every time Daniel's boys were praised, celebrated, and showcased, while mine were politely ignored. I thought of the school plays they attended for Daniel's kids, the glowing Facebook posts, the framed photos on their mantle. Meanwhile, they had never once shown up for Emma's dance recital or Lucas's preschool art fair. Even at Christmas, the difference was impossible to miss. Daniel's kids always got the extra presents, the bigger boxes, the newest toys, while mine got what was left. And now they weren't even pretending anymore. "I can't believe this," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You're actually telling me that my kids aren't welcome, but Daniel's are." "Oh, Ally, don't be dramatic," Mom sighed, her irritation now unmistakable. "It's just one dinner. You and Liam are still invited, of course." I almost laughed, except it wasn't funny. It was cruel. They wanted me there, but not the two people I loved most in the world. I took a shaky breath. "No, Mom," I said finally, the words steady but heavy. "If my kids aren't welcome, then neither am I." There was a long, tense silence. Then, with a sharp exhale, she replied, "Suit yourself," and hung up. The line went dead. I stood there in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space where her voice had been. My hand still gripped the phone, my heart pounding in my ears. From the living room, I could hear Emma and Lucas giggling as they built a pillow fort, their laughter pure and unbothered, so completely unaware that their grandparents, the ones they adored, had just cast them aside like an inconvenience. Tears blurred my vision as I watched the blanket drape over their heads. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn my parents' approval, bending myself into smaller and smaller versions just to fit their expectations. But at what cost? If I let them get away with this, if I went to that dinner while my children sat at home wondering why they weren't good enough, What kind of mother would that make me? I took a deep breath and looked toward my kids, the decision already made in my heart. For once, I didn't need my parents' approval. I had something far more important, 2 little hearts that deserved to know they were enough, just as they were. I wasn't doing this anymore. They had made their choice, now it was time for me to make mine. And whether they realized it or not, they would come to regret it sooner than they thought. The weight of my mother's words hung in the air long after the call ended. I stood in the stillness of my kitchen, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My phone was still clutched tightly in my hand, my fingers trembling as I finally set it down. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, a tangled mess of anger, hurt, and disbelief. I had always known my parents favored Daniel. Everyone did. But I had spent years convincing myself that it wasn't as bad as it seemed, that somewhere beneath the comparisons and the quiet dismissals, they still loved me and my children just as much. But tonight had ripped away every last illusion. They hadn't even tried to hide it anymore. They loved Daniel's children more, plain and simple. A sudden burst of laughter pulled me from my thoughts. I turned toward the living room to see Emma and Lucas, giggling as they crawled through their pillow fort, faces glowing with innocence and joy. My chest tightened painfully. They had no idea they'd just been rejected by the very people they adored most. They deserved better than this. Better than the constant comparisons, the subtle dismissals, the love that always came with conditions. I squared my shoulders, forcing a smile as I walked toward them. "All right, you two," I said, keeping my voice steady, "who's ready for movie night?" Lucas's face lit up instantly. "Can we watch the one with the talking dog?" I laughed softly, scooping him into my arms and pressing a kiss to his curls. "Of course we can, buddy." Emma wrapped herself in a blanket beside me as we all settled onto the couch. On the surface, everything looked normal, just another cozy family night. But inside, my anger refused to quiet. It simmered beneath my skin, mingling with years of disappointment and exhaustion. I had bent over backwards to fit into my parents' world, to earn their approval, their affection, their acknowledgement. I had tried to play by their rules, to be the daughter they wanted. But it had never been enough. Nothing ever was. And I was done trying. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains as I reached for my phone. A new message blinked on the screen, from Daniel. *, Mom said you're being difficult about Thanksgiving. Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic, *. I stared at the words, my jaw tightening. Of course she'd already gone to him, her golden boy, her shield, her echo. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard before I typed back. "Oh, so she told you she uninvited my kids but invited yours." The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. A full minute passed before his reply finally came through. Daniel *. She just wants a calm dinner, ally. You know how your kids can be, a lot. A lot. The words hit harder than I expected, slicing through the fragile calm I'd tried to hold on to. He said it so casually, as if my children were some kind of burden, something to be managed, not loved. Something too much for their perfect little world. Something inside me snapped. "Enjoy your perfect Thanksgiving, Daniel," I typed back, my fingers trembling. "I won't be there." And before he could respond, I turned off my phone. If they didn't want me or my children at their table, fine. I wouldn't be part of their world at all. Not anymore. For years, I had been the reliable one, the steady, predictable daughter who held everything together. When my parents needed groceries, they called me. When their Wi-Fi stopped working, I was the one who drove across town to fix it. When they wanted help planning a family party, I was the one juggling phone calls, decorations, and errands. And Daniel? He got to show up, smile, and bask in their praise. The golden child, doing the bare minimum while reaping all the rewards. But if I wasn't part of their preferred family, then they didn't get to benefit from me anymore. A week before Thanksgiving, my phone rang again. My mother's name flashed across the screen. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But curiosity, or maybe hope, got the better of me. I sighed and answered. "Hello, Mom." "Ally," she said, her voice careful, almost tentative. "I just wanted to check in. I know you were upset, but I really hope you'll reconsider. We'd love to have you and Liam there." Her tone softened slightly, but there was a catch. There was always a catch. "Not you and the kids," she added quickly. "Just you and Liam." I closed my eyes, taking a slow breath to steady the surge of anger and sadness rising in my chest. I meant what I said, Mom. If my kids aren't welcome, neither am I. She sighed, the sound sharp and weary, as if I were the one being unreasonable. I just don't understand why you're being so stubborn, Ally. It's just one night. You know how much Daniel's boys mean to us. There it was. The final, painful truth, spoken plainly at last. My children, the two little humans I would lay down my life for, would never be enough for her. Not compared to his. I clenched my jaw, my voice low but firm. You've made it clear where we stand, Mom. I won't bother you again. Ally, don't be like this. But I didn't let her finish. I ended the call, my thumb pressing the red button before she could say another word. And this time, I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't second-guess myself. For the first time in years, I felt a strange, quiet strength settle inside me. I was done chasing their approval. Done trying to fit into a family that had never really made room for me, or for my children. This Thanksgiving, the table might be smaller. But in my home, surrounded by the only people who truly mattered, there would finally be peace. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I started small. When my dad called that weekend asking me to come over and set up his new TV, I let the call go to voicemail. When Mom texted, asking if I could pick up her prescription, I left it unread. For years, I had been their safety net, the one who dropped everything, who showed up, who fixed, arranged, and carried the weight of their convenience. Always available. Always reliable. But not anymore. And it didn't take long for them to notice. By the time Thanksgiving week arrived, I had 12 missed calls and 6 unread texts, each one more insistent than the last. I ignored them all. The silence felt strange at first, almost foreign. But then, freeing. On the morning of Thanksgiving, a message from Daniel lit up my phone. Daniel *, Mom and Dad are really upset that you're ignoring them. Are you seriously going to let this go this far? I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. Me *, it already went too far when they told me my kids weren't welcome. He didn't reply. Of course he didn't. With a calm I hadn't felt in years, I silenced my phone and turned my attention back to where it belonged, my family. Emma and Lucas were sitting at the kitchen table, helping Liam stir pancake batter. They were covered in flour, giggling uncontrollably every time a spoon slipped or batter splattered onto the counter. Liam flipped pancakes with dramatic flair, pretending to nearly drop them just to make the kids laugh harder. This was our Thanksgiving. No tension. No forced smiles. No walking on eggshells. Just laughter, warmth, and the smell of pancakes and maple syrup filling the air. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Free from the weight of trying to earn love that should have come unconditionally. But that peace wouldn't last. Because little did I know, my parents weren't done. And their next move would be something I could never forgive. That Thanksgiving morning was the calmest one I'd had in as long as I could remember. No rushing to get the kids into their best clothes, no juggling dishes to bring to their perfect dinner, no anxious glances at the clock. Just us. Together. Emma was humming softly as she drizzled syrup over her pancakes, Lucas proudly showing off his pancake art that looked more like a blob than a heart. Liam caught my gaze and smiled, the kind of soft, knowing smile that said we're doing the right thing. Then my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Then again. The sound cut through the laughter like a blade. I stared at the phone, my chest tightening with a familiar dread I thought I'd left behind. They weren't giving up, and something told me this wasn't just another guilt trip. This was the calm before a storm I didn't see coming. Liam shot me a concerned look from across the table. Want me to turn it off? He asked quietly, nodding toward my buzzing phone. I hesitated, then shook my head. No, if it's an emergency, I should at least know. Taking a slow breath, I swiped to answer. What is it, Mom? I said, keeping my voice flat. Oh, now you pick up, she snapped, her tone dripping with irritation. I suppose you're just sitting at home feeling sorry for yourself while we're all here having a lovely dinner. I sighed. Mom, if you called to gloat, I really don't have time for this. That's not why I called, she shot back sharply. I need to ask you something. I pinched the bridge of my nose, already bracing myself. What now? Did you cancel the credit card? For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. The room suddenly felt smaller, quieter. I turned slightly away from Liam, lowering my voice. What are you talking about? Your father's credit card, she said, as if it were obvious. The one we've been using for groceries, gas, essential things, it was declined this morning. A cold, sinking feeling spread through me. My pulse quickened as the realization hit, the card wasn't theirs, it was mine. Years ago, when Dad was recovering from surgery and money had been tight, I'd added them as authorized users on my credit card. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they got back on their feet. But then life got busy. I forgot to remove them. And apparently, they never reminded me. My stomach twisted. You mean my credit card? There was a pause on the line, then Mom scoffed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Ally. It's just a card. You make good money, and we figured. You figured what? I cut in, my voice trembling now. That you could keep using my money. That I wouldn't notice. Oh, don't act like this is some big betrayal, she snapped, her tone turning icy. We raised you. The least you could do is support us now. I inhaled sharply, disbelief flooding through me. Are you serious right now? After you told me my kids weren't good enough to come to Thanksgiving, you still expected me to pay for your groceries. Ally, don't start with that again, she said, exasperated. You always make everything about feelings. You're impossible to talk to. I could almost see her rolling her eyes on the other end, just like she always did, when I dared to stand my ground. Unbelievable, I muttered. You used me, Mom. And the worst part is, you don't even see what's wrong with it. She let out one of her trademark sighs, long, loud, and full of feigned disappointment. You know what, Ally? This is exactly why we don't like having difficult conversations with you. I stared at the phone, her words echoing in my ear, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't hurt. I was done. Done being their crutch. Done being their afterthought. Done pretending that love was something I had to buy to deserve. You always overreact. That was the last straw. A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I even realized it. You know what, Mom? You're right about one thing, I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. I did cancel the card. And since we're being honest now, let me make something perfectly clear, you won't see another cent from me. Ever. There was a sharp inhale on the other end, a shocked gasp as if I had just slapped her. Ally, don't be ridiculous. I cut her off before she could twist it back on me. And while we're at it, don't expect Christmas gifts. Or birthday gifts. Or anything else. You made your choice when you told me my kids weren't welcome in your home. Now I'm making mine. For a moment, all I could hear was her breathing, tight, shallow, angry. Then, in a voice colder than I'd ever heard from her, she said, "You'll regret this." And just like that, she hung up. The silence that followed was heavy, almost humming in my ears. I stood there gripping the phone so tightly that my fingers ached. Then, slowly, I turned back toward the kitchen. Liam was watching me carefully from across the room, concern etched on his face. Everything okay? I forced a small smile, doing my best to sound steady. Yeah, I said quietly. Just taking out the trash. He didn't press further. He just nodded, trusting me to handle it in my own way. The rest of the day unfolded like something out of a dream. Our own Thanksgiving, no drama, no tension, no guilt. Just the four of us, together. We watched movies, baked cookies, and played board games until the kids collapsed in giggling heaps on the couch. For the first time in years, there was no weight on my chest. No need to walk on eggshells. No pressure to perform or please anyone. Just laughter, warmth, and peace. But beneath that calm, a quiet unease lingered. I knew my parents too well. They weren't the kind of people to let things go, especially when it came to control. Or money. And I was right. The silence didn't last long. 3 days after Thanksgiving, my phone buzzed across the counter. The name flashing on the screen made my stomach sink. Daniel. I stared at it for a moment, debating whether to ignore it. But curiosity, and maybe a trace of old habit, won out. I exhaled sharply and answered. What do you want? I asked flatly. What the hell, ally? Daniel's voice came through immediately, sharp and accusatory. Mom just called me in tears, saying you cut them off. What is wrong with you? I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar frustration creep in. Of course. He wasn't calling to ask why, he wasn't calling to understand. He was calling to scold, to play the role he'd perfected all his life, the golden son defending the perfect parents. But this time, I wasn't going to let him control the story. I closed my eyes and pinched the bridge of my nose, forcing myself to stay calm. Did she also tell you, I said slowly, that they'd been using my credit card for years without my knowledge? There was a pause on the line. Well, Daniel began hesitantly, she said you were helping them out. Helping them out? A humorless laugh escaped me. Daniel, they've racked up thousands of dollars on my account without even asking. All while treating my kids like they're an inconvenience. But sure, let's pretend I'm the villain here. He sighed, clearly trying to keep his temper in check. Look, I get that you're mad, but cutting them off completely. Don't you think that's a little extreme? You mean the way they completely excluded my children from Thanksgiving? I shot back. They just wanted a peaceful evening, he said defensively. Mom told me your kids can be a little wild. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles ached. Oh, I see. So they can use my money whenever they want, but my kids aren't good enough to sit at their table. Got it. He groaned in frustration. You're twisting this. No, Daniel, I said firmly, my voice colder now. I'm finally seeing it for what it really is. There was a long silence before his tone shifted, softer, more calculated. Look, maybe we can work something out. What if you just kept helping them but with limits? Like a smaller monthly transfer. That way, no one has to suffer over a misunderstanding. A cold laugh bubbled up from my throat. Let me get this straight, you want me to keep sending them money after they told me they love your kids more than mine? They didn't mean it like that, he muttered. They said it, Daniel, I snapped. Those were their exact words. He went quiet. Completely quiet. When he finally spoke again, his voice was stiff and clipped. Fine. If you want to be selfish, that's on you. But don't expect Mom and Dad to forgive you anytime soon. I smirked and shook my head. I'll survive. Before he could say another word, I ended the call. For the next few weeks, the silence from my parents was deafening. No calls. No texts. Not even a passive-aggressive, hope you're doing well, email. I knew exactly what they were doing, playing their favorite game, the silent treatment. They thought I'd cave, like I always had before. That I'd come crawling back, apologizing just to keep the peace. But what they didn't realize was that for the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their approval anymore, not their validation, not their guilt, not their control. And just when I thought they had finally given up, they pulled one last, desperate stunt. It was the week before Christmas. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, the kids were laughing in the living room, and for once, everything felt calm. Then Liam came in from the porch, a letter in hand, and a frown creasing his brow. It's from your parents, he said quietly. I froze, my stomach tightening. Oh, great. Let me guess, guilt, manipulation, or straight-up gaslighting. He gave me a wry smile. Why don't we find out? I took the envelope, my hands trembling slightly as I tore it open. But the moment I saw the document inside, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a letter. It was a legal notice. What the? I muttered, scanning the page. The words blurred for a second before coming into horrifying focus. They were demanding reimbursement for years of emotional and financial support. A disbelieving laugh escaped me. You've got to be kidding. Liam took the papers, his expression darkening as he read. They're saying you owe them for raising you, for food, clothes, school, even medical expenses. He looked up, incredulous. Are they seriously trying to bill you for your own childhood? Apparently, they were. They had itemized everything, from school lunches and piano lessons to a dentist bill from 1999, all neatly totaled at the bottom. $78, $542.00. I blinked, shaking my head in disbelief. They seriously think I'm going to give them almost 80 grand. Liam scoffed, the corner of his mouth curling in disgust. They must be really desperate. I took a deep breath, the paper trembling in my hands as the anger simmered beneath the surface. This wasn't about money. It never had been. This was about control. A final, pathetic attempt to drag me back into their web of guilt and obligation. I looked at Liam, my decision already made. I think it's time I pay them a little visit. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house, the letter folded tightly in my fist. The familiar neighborhood felt foreign now, colder, smaller. When I reached their front door, I hesitated for just a second before knocking. Mom answered. Her eyes widened in surprise, then hardened instantly. Oh, so now you decide to show up. I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, I held up the letter between us. You seriously thought this would work? Her lips curled into that familiar, condescending smile, the one I'd grown up fearing. We just want what's fair, ally. After everything we did for you. But this time, I didn't let her finish. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't that scared little girl anymore. She folded her arms, her chin tilting up in that self-righteous way I knew all too well. It's what's fair, she said coldly. A sharp, incredulous laugh escaped me. Fair. You want to charge me for being your child, while expecting free money from me for the rest of your lives. That's what you call fair. Before she could reply, Dad appeared in the doorway. His expression was smug, like he was delivering some moral lesson. We sacrificed a lot for you, ally, he said, voice dripping with disappointment. And now you're abandoning us. I stared at them both, shaking my head slowly. No, Dad. You abandoned me. When you made it clear that my kids weren't good enough. When you lied, used my credit card, and acted like it was your right. When you decided that love came with a price tag. Mom's lips pressed into a thin, angry line. If you don't want to pay, she snapped, then I guess we'll have to involve lawyers. I met her gaze steadily, my tone calm, too calm. Go ahead. She blinked, thrown off. What? Take me to court, I said, crossing my arms. Try to explain to a judge why you're suing your own daughter for expenses from 20 years ago. I'd love to see how that goes. For the first time, silence filled the room. They looked at each other, the confidence draining from their faces. Dad cleared his throat. We just thought you'd want to make things right. A humorless laugh left me. Oh, I am making things right. Before they could react, I held up the letter, tore it clean in half, and let the pieces fall to the floor. Their eyes widened in shock. I'm done being your personal ATM, I said, voice steady, final. Mom gasped, her voice rising in fury. You ungrateful little. I turned on my heel before she could finish. Merry Christmas, I called over my shoulder, not looking back. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking, but not from fear. For the first time in my life, I felt lighter. As I drove away, headlights cutting through the cold December night, it hit me. They weren't angry about the money. They were angry because, for the first time ever, I had all the power, and I wasn't giving it back. For a brief moment, I thought maybe this would be the end of it. That after ripping up their absurd invoice, they'd finally realize how far they'd gone. Maybe, just maybe, they'd sit in the wreckage of their own arrogance and see the truth. But people like them don't change. They don't reflect, they escalate. It started small. A text from Mom 2 days before Christmas. Mom *ally, this is ridiculous. We're family, you don't turn your back on family over a silly argument. I ignored it. The next day, another message. Mom *, we forgive you. Come to Christmas dinner, and we'll forget this ever happened. I stared at the screen, a cold laugh bubbling in my chest. We forgive you. Even now they were trying to twist the story, to make me the villain in a drama they created. And deep down, I knew, this was only the beginning of whatever came next. I almost laughed out loud. They forgive me. The audacity was almost impressive. A few hours later, another message lit up my phone, this time from Daniel. Daniel *, they're really hurting, ally. Just apologize so we can move on. I rolled my eyes, shaking my head. Of course. In his world, I was always the one who had done something wrong, the difficult one, the drama queen, the troublemaker who refused to play along. I typed back, my fingers flying across the screen. Me *, funny, they weren't hurting when they were stealing from me. Or when they told me my kids weren't welcome. I think they'll survive. Then I hit send, and blocked his number. For the first time, there was silence. No calls. No guilt trips. No manipulative apologies disguised as love. By Christmas Eve, the quiet in our home felt peaceful, real. Liam and I had just finished putting the last ornament on the tree. The lights glowed softly, casting a golden warmth across the room. Emma and Lucas were in their matching pajamas, dancing around the living room, giggling as Jingle Bell Rock played on the speaker. It was perfect, our Christmas. No pretending. No walking on eggshells. Just happiness. Then the doorbell rang. Liam froze mid-laugh, exchanging a wary look with me. No way, he muttered under his breath. My stomach sank. I walked to the door, peered through the peephole, and felt my heart sink even lower. Mom and Dad. For a second I considered ignoring them. But then I saw what they were holding, a giant, beautifully wrapped gift box, the kind meant to make a statement, not an apology. I sighed and opened the door. Mom's face lit up with forced cheerfulness, the kind she used when she wanted something. Merry Christmas, sweetheart, she sang. Dad stepped forward, holding the box out. We brought something for the kids. I crossed my arms. No thanks. Mom's smile faltered for the briefest moment, then snapped back into place. Ally, don't be stubborn. Let's not ruin Christmas over this. You already ruined Christmas, I said, my tone sharp. When you told me my children weren't good enough for your table. Remember that? Her mouth opened, then closed. Dad sighed, shifting his weight. Come on, Ally, he said, trying for that reasonable, fatherly tone that used to make me cave. Let's just be a family again. I looked at them, really looked, and felt nothing. No longing, no guilt, no pain. Just exhaustion. You don't want to be a family, I said quietly. You want me to go back to being useful. Their silence told me everything. I shook my head. Take your gift and go. Mom's voice hardened, the sweetness cracking. Ally, don't be selfish. Think about the children. I met her gaze and smiled coldly. I am thinking about the children. That's exactly why you're not in their lives anymore. Dad's jaw tightened. You really want to do this? I exhaled slowly, steady and certain. I already did. And with that, I closed the door in their faces. That night, as snow began to fall outside and the house filled with laughter and the smell of cinnamon cookies, I realized something profound. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing peace. That Christmas was everything I'd ever dreamed of, simple, warm, and real. Emma and Lucas tore into their presents, their laughter echoing through the house like music. Wrapping paper covered the floor, cocoa mugs sat half-finished on the table, and Liam and I just watched them, soaking in every second. We played board games until our sides hurt from laughing, built a blanket fort in the living room, and ended the night watching Home Alone for the 100th time. Emma fell asleep with her head in my lap, Lucas curled up beside her. And for the first time in my life, Christmas wasn't about performance, it wasn't about earning approval or proving anything. It was about us. Real family. Chosen family. The kind that doesn't put conditions on love, that doesn't keep score or demand payment for affection. The kind that loves because it wants to, not because it expects something in return. For a brief moment, I thought it was finally over. That after everything, the financial cutoff, the humiliation, the confrontation at my front door, my parents would finally accept that I was done. But I underestimated them. I underestimated how desperate people like them become when they lose control. Because on New Year's Eve, they did something I never saw coming. The night was supposed to be a fresh start, a celebration of letting go, of moving forward. I'd told myself that countless times that day as I set up the snack table, filling it with chips, cupcakes, and a big bowl of sparkling punch. Laughter filled our home. The kids were running around in their glittery party hats, counting down the hours until midnight. Liam was in the kitchen pouring champagne for us, the soft smile on his face saying more than words ever could. It was our night, our own little world, full of peace and joy. Then, a knock. I froze, mid-laugh. The sound sliced through the warmth like a blade. Liam looked up, instantly wary. You think? I already knew. My stomach twisted. I walked to the door, heart thudding, and took a steadying breath before opening it. And there they were. Mom, Dad, Daniel, and his perfectly polished wife, Sophie. All standing on my doorstep like some kind of intervention squad. It was an ambush. I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. What do you want? Mom's face spread into that familiar, sugary smile, the one that always appeared right before she tried to manipulate me. We just want to talk. No thanks, I said flatly. Dad sighed heavily, already slipping into his role as the voice of reason. Ally, enough. You've made your point. Now let's fix this before things go too far. I stared at him, pulse steady, heart calm. For once, I wasn't the scared daughter trying to keep the peace. I was the woman who'd finally learned she didn't owe them anything. I narrowed my eyes. Too far? What does that even mean? Mom exchanged a quick, uneasy glance with Daniel before turning back to me, her voice syrupy and fake. We just don't want this to affect the kids, Ally. Something about her tone made my skin crawl. Affect the kids? What are you talking about? I demanded. Daniel stepped forward, his arms crossed, wearing that same self-righteous look he always did when he thought he was the adult in the room. Mom and Dad have been talking to a lawyer, he said flatly. For a second, I just stared, trying to process his words. Then, a cold wave of dread slid down my spine. A lawyer. I repeated slowly. Mom nodded, her eyes gleaming with mock sympathy. We're just worried, sweetheart. You've cut your children off from their real family over a silly misunderstanding. That's not fair to them. My pulse thundered in my ears. What are you trying to say? Dad cleared his throat, his expression firm, almost smug. We've been looking into grandparents' rights. For a moment the world went silent. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. And then, I laughed. It wasn't a soft, amused laugh. It was sharp, loud, and just a little unhinged. They thought they could legally force their way back into my life, into my children's lives, after everything they'd done. Daniel's face twisted in irritation. What's so funny? I wiped at my eyes, still laughing. Oh, you're serious. You actually think any judge is going to look at this situation and side with you? Mom's lips pressed into a thin, angry line. We've done nothing wrong, she said stiffly. Nothing wrong. I stepped forward, voice rising. You stole from me. You used my credit card for years without my consent. You treated my children like they were beneath yours. And now, because I finally stood up to you, you think you can bully your way back in. Dad's face darkened, his voice low and warning. You don't want to do this, Ally. Oh, I said with a cold smile, but I do. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and held it up. I want you to think very carefully about what you're about to do, I said, my tone calm but lethal. Because I have everything, every text, every voicemail, every demand for money, and if you try this, I will bury you. Sophie gasped softly. Ally, come on, this isn't necessary. No, I snapped, my eyes locked on my parents. You have no case, you know it. I know it. And if you push me any further, I'll make sure every single person you know sees exactly who you really are. A tense silence fell over the porch. Then Mom's mask slipped. Her face twisted in anger. You're being unreasonable, she hissed. I smiled, steady and calm. No, Mom. I'm finally being smart. With that, I stepped back, my hand on the door. Happy New Year, I said sweetly, then slammed it in their faces. They never followed through on their pathetic legal threat. Deep down, they knew they had nothing. They knew they'd lost. And for the first time in my life, I'd won. In the weeks that followed, there was silence. No calls. No texts. No manipulation disguised as love. And the strangest part. The silence felt good. Peaceful. Freeing. The weight of their expectations, gone. The pressure to please, gone. The endless cycle of guilt, gone. Months later, on a warm spring afternoon, I sat on the porch, a glass of lemonade in my hand, watching Emma and Lucas chase bubbles across the yard. Liam handed me another glass and sat beside me, his smile soft. It's been quiet, he said. I nodded. Yeah. Feels good. He smirked. Think they'll ever try again? I watched my kids laugh as the sunlight caught the bubbles floating through the air. Doesn't matter, I said, smiling faintly. Because I already won. I looked at my children, my real family, and knew one thing for certain. I'd never let anyone make them feel unwanted again.